foreign direct investment, which in the 90s and the early part of the last century, the last decade, we found there was some resistance, I think has been accepted as a very important additionality of resource in India. And therefore, the resistance against them, even by left groups, is very marginal. And by trade unions is, I think, is just symbolic. And therefore, it's an important acceptability of this change scenario which has taken place. We must now try to ease in the processes of doing business in India. How do we reduce the number of permissions? How do we make sure that environmental permissions are not held pending for years together, so that they must be cleared? How do we ensure that the foreign investment proposals are either automatic or cleared at the earliest? Now, these are changes which have taken place. Some legislations which had been enacted earlier, we are scanning through each one of them so that the complications arising out of those legislations we can do away with. So I would certainly say at this stage, when I look back the last 12 months, easing the processes, both at the center and the states have also joined in because all states are now competing for that resource. And therefore, they are in the process. I don't think we've gone all hog, but that's work in progress as far as that agenda is concerned. Our taxation structures. I think the taxation structures, some were obsolete and some were bringing India a bad name. So we had to take a very bold decision of saying the slab of corporate tax in India will now go down to 25%. And the object was that we must give to the general body of both domestic and international investors a competitive taxation rate, because in our neighborhood, that's what the average taxation rates are. And therefore, if I am going to tax people 10 to 15% more than that, then obviously India loses its attraction as an investment destination. So we are now in the process from the coming days onwards. Every year for the next four years, we'll be gradually bringing down the direct taxation rates in India so as to make our rates competitive, at least with the region, and better than most parts of the world on this side. We've also offered various attractive investments in terms of alternative investment funds. But one of the major reforms we are now undertaken is the indirect taxation. Every state has its own indirect taxes. They have a large number of them. And therefore, transportation of goods or services from one state to another is a problem. Building consensus between these states is highly challenging. And therefore, through the goods and services tax, I broadly succeeded in building a consensus. And I think the most important aspect of the goods and services tax is that 1/6 of the world's population will be one market. Therefore, for any investor in India, both domestic and international, he has a market at hand. There's a seamless transfer of goods and services which will take place. The rates of taxation eventually will come down because a tax on tax itself will not be possible if the GST is implemented. And I think the high point of the GST negotiations in a short period, because for the last 8-9 years it was eluding us, is that when I presented it in the Lok Sabha for approval, the Congress party decided to abstain. For some reason, though they had supported this idea of this bill in the at the earlier stages, they had introduced it. So their abstinence was for political reasons. But every other political party, including their allies, supported this legislation. Now it's important that coal, mineral, GST, all regional parties which are otherwise opposed to us have supported each one of these legislations because the GST will benefit the consuming states, and most consuming states are the ones which are less developed. The coal and mineral resource will go to West Bengal, it will go to Jharkhand, it will go to Orissa, it will go to partly Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, little bit Karnataka and Maharashtra. Now these are the states which all have the tribal pockets. And therefore, you are directly transferring your resources as far as these are concerned.
Hi, Swaminathan Aiyar, The Times of India. If you look, since we started off with the idea of Thatcher and Reagan, actually Thatcher did very little in her first term. Wanted to get re-elected and then went for the Big Bang. Is there a policy within the BJP that in this term you are going to do things in slow incremental terms, and if you get re-elected, then you go for a Big Bang next time? It would be a defensible policy. I don't know that you actually thought it out. The way things are working out, it seems to me perhaps you're going that direction.
Swami, I've been following every word you write. And I am still trying to discover the meaning of Big Bang.
Shall I tell you?
I'll be educated on this.
Privatize worst 10 banks. Say that you will abolish the railway board and have railway corporations within the next 5 years. With Deborah Committee. Have a program for police judicial reform where crooks are put in jail within 2 years. Just 3 things.
You see, when you let me take your third point and the first point. Crooks being put in jail for the right reason. In fact, when I say that people with assets abroad must pay tax, and if they don't do it, then penal action will follow, your colleagues in your paper say this is a draconian law. Therefore, I'm aware of the inherent limitations of these kind of suggestions. Now, when you speak in terms of privatize all the banks,
10 worst.
The 10 worst banks, in fact, there are only 26 of them which are in the public sector. We are bringing down the equity of the government down to 52% or let's say 51%. I am open to the suggestion of consolidation of some of the banks which are not performing, because that suggestion has been coming. But I still do feel that in promoting a large number of these projects, now stalled projects, it's eventually to these banks that we've been going and asking them to help us to rebuild those stalled projects. Are you aware of the fact that out of the 15.5 crore bank accounts as a financial inclusion, private sector banks had a contribution of 23 lakhs. And therefore, there's a lot of distance in these areas funding highway programs. I can still depend on the state bank to do it when the program is stalled. Not that the private sector is not doing it, the banks are performing extremely well. And therefore, we've reached a happy situation. I'd like to see more private sector banks doing well, more internet banking, more foreign banks investing into India. But at the same time, I am not willing to get blocked in one controversy and say, because one reform has, therefore that becomes symbolic that the government is helpless. I'd rather do those 300 things which are reasonably possible, and I think for the next 1 or 2 years we have our agenda quite full.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.